Hey there everyone, just wanted to say thank you for coming to check out my process video for my house design that I did for my personal project, Tire. First, I'd like to thank my buddy Scott for the super fun animated intro. I went to school with Scott and he's one of the coolest motion graphics people that I know, so I asked him to do a little intro and he did very, very quickly. And yeah, so thank you Scott, much appreciated. You can check out more of Scott's stuff down below in the description area. So yeah, be sure to check out Scott's stuff. And here we go. I started off with a super dumpy sketch of this house that I kind of threw colors and line work over just to have some semblance of what I was going for. And then lowered the opacity to start tightening my line work. With this one, I really wanted to just do like a flat call out. I didn't want to, draw anything in, perspective or anything. I just really wanted to focus on the design of the building. In the Dam Keeper art book, they did such a good job of showing all of like the fun little designs that they did for like the kitchen and the pig's house. And it was super inspiring to me to see something that was really focused on just the design and layout of this space as opposed to everything else involved. So that's what I chose to do with this, just really focus on the flat 2D design. One major thing that I was thinking when I was doing this was, when I'm designing this house, how can I best inform the person next in like the link of the chain? So if I were to pass this off to, let's say, a 3D modeler or like surfacing or something, that they have all the information that they need to make, this house come to life. Yeah, so right here you can see I'm starting to rough in some of these shingles. I think one thing that I was really trying to, keep in mind for myself is that I don't want any parallel lines in this part. I just wanted it to kind of feel like so weird and wonky and like everything was starting to sag a little bit. It just gives like a house a little more character and a little more just, weirdness as opposed to just a regular house design or something. As you can see, I will just grab things that I've already drawn. So right there, I grabbed a little chunk of the shingle and then I moved it down to the lower right corner just to make sure that it's going to kind of stay the same in terms of like distance and stuff that I've already designed. Also, one thing I do a lot is I will draw one thing kind of good-ish. So you see in the upper left, I drew the scalloped shingle pattern, and then I've done that once correctly, and then I will use that in every other instance of the house just because I don't want to waste more time trying to draw something that I've already drawn that is like okay in my book. Right there, you can see me struggling to make a decent line. I'm sure everyone can relate to that one. I will grab little bits and warp and squish and squash stuff to kind of get it to bend to my will. As you can see, I will sit there and try to get the right line for as long as I'm comfortable doing so, and then I will eventually give up. One thing I also do a lot is I draw like a pattern that I have to use. And like I said, I just do it once and then kind of copy the thing, throughout, because I don't want to try and get in there and draw every little tiny bit like just right. It just seems to me to be a little bit faster, especially in like a production art mindset or pipeline. You're going to really want to have some little tips and tricks to kind of save you a couple minutes here and there. So right now I'm on the garage stuff. You can see that I wanted to really break up the silhouette on the top of the garage paneling there. So I've been kind of moving it around a little bit, making sure that, it feels kind of weird and broken and no lines are straight and stuff. You can definitely see it on the front end of the garage that line is broken up in every way possible, that it's, just as weird as I can want to make it. And, same thing again, I took the same corner bit from the left side of the garage, warped it, skewed it a little bit so I didn't have to redraw and find some other inconsistency on the right side of the house. So yeah, just starting to tighten things up. This is, always a time-consuming process, just doing nice line work. And I think that was one thing that kind of intrigued me about, trying to do something like this, is that it's not something I usually do. So it was nice to kind of make myself a little bit uncomfortable and yeah, just kind of make myself really do something a little bit out of my usual instead of just painting or, this or that. Just some really nice looking line work. Let's see. If I might come up here a few times, but I abuse the rotation tool in Photoshop. I have this really bad habit of wanting to just make the right, stroke. So I'll just rotate the canvas quicker so I don't have to move my hand to a weird position. It's probably bad, and I'll probably end up getting carpal tunnel pretty quickly or something. But right now it's okay. Going back to my tried and true of drawing things once correctly and then warping it to make it work for me. Like I said, any little bit that you can get to kind of speed up your process will definitely help. Man, getting the top of that house is a real pain in the butt. One thing I think you should be able to notice is that I zoom out all the time to make sure that my silhouette is reading okay, to make sure I'm breaking up the forms all right, to make sure, everything is starting to, flow together a little bit. Right here, you can see I'm drawing some, red line framework to make sure that the flow of that portion of the house has a general overall line of action to it, but it's not necessarily directly adhering to, that perfect of a line. It's kind of a little bit of my background in animation showing through, that you still kind of have to, abide by those things and make sure that, things will still follow something, but they're not necessarily, uninteresting or anything. So yeah. Throughout this process, I was constantly flattening my layers together, because trying to keep track of a bajillion line layers can get really ugly sometimes. So there's going to be a little weirdness in, some edges here and there, but yeah, it's probably for the best. Try to keep things a little bit simple. As you can see, that scalloped shingle thing definitely just copied from the upper left, I guess, source file that I have of the little pattern. I think it helps out a lot. Same thing with these little indents in the roof part. I'm not really sure where I ended up keeping those hidden, but they're probably just on some layer off to the side. Right now, just filling things in. It's good to break up from your pattern a little bit with some originality if you're, if you're just trying to break it up a little bit. Man, you can really see that that rough under drawing coming through. One thing I cannot stress enough is the power of reference gathering. I went around my neighborhood. I sat online looking at old houses, New England houses, and, took pictures of, my house back home, and took pictures all around my neighborhood, of just weird windows, or of, color palette choices, or of how front yards are composed, or what little things would you find there? Would you have played baseball in the front yard and maybe a baseball got lodged under the bush, or was your mom a gardener, so she always had a watering can in her front yard, but it was never actually full and it was never actually used, but it was just there in case mom needed it. I think those little details kind of help out a lot. Especially me. So never underestimate the power of reference gathering. It helps me out a ton. It just makes your job a little bit easier. You don't have to keep pulling from the same things that you know. You get to expand your horizons a little bit in terms of your visual vocabulary or your library of stuff. I'm not sure if I'm doing it right here, but one thing I do a lot is use the lasso tool. Even in areas that is probably incredibly unnecessary to use. It just gives me the cleanest stuff that I can get. So I think up at the very top, there's a little vent that I could have just lined, with my brush or something, but I used the lasso tool because it's going to give me the most clean, most precise thing that I can possibly get, at any point. And when I go into coloring this, you'll see that I do almost the entire thing with the lasso tool, because I've been in areas before where just it is just better for me that way. Right now I'm tightening up the porch. I think I'm about to get into the front bit of the porch where you'll see I do the same thing that I did with the line of action with the shape of the house, is that I will draw over the kind of overall flow that I had for the front pillars of the house. I don't know, for me, it made a lot of sense just to kind of, I don't know, like everything still has to flow together. Everything still has to feel like it was, I don't know, just a little more interesting than just straight across. Especially with this house that is so wonky and wacky. I think it helped me out a lot. Yeah, you can see there on the upper right, I had previously drawn some props that I had planned on throwing in here. Some of these props were actually sketched from mine and my girlfriend's trip to Europe. We were at a very small house in Germany, and they had the most interesting looking watering cans. So I sketched a whole just pages worth of weird watering cans and like potted plants. And I knew that I was going to end up using them for this. So never think that you're not going to use some weird little thing you see out in the wild. Like, have your sketchbook on you, write things down, write things that you think are wacky, or, just sketch whatever funny thing you see. I feel like that was one super believable thing that I got out of this, is I got to use some actual props that I had, used in or seen in real life. Right there, I had made sure that the line work of my house was airtight. So, there's a contiguous line all the way around. So all I had to do was select the outside, invert my selection, and then fill it in. Yeah, it saves me quite a bit of time. I've seen a bunch of people that will, spend so much time just getting that base part down in their coloring stage. And it's not acceptable for a production art pipeline. So, as you can see here, I'm lassoing to my heart's content. I love me some lasso tool. For the longest time, I didn't have a tablet, and I would color in sketches I did with a mouse. I don't know why on earth I thought that was a good idea, but I did. So I've become very familiar with the lasso tool, especially the polygon lasso tool. It gives you such a clean selection, and I just love it. Yeah, so this part's probably going to be a little bit dry and devoid of any real feedback or interesting tidbits, other than just watching me fill stuff in. If you notice in the upper right hand corner, I have the color palette for my house laid out. I will go over there and pick all the colors that I need if I'm doing something simple, just like filling in the colors of this design. But it's really nice to have there, so like you're never going to worry about selecting something that might have a little drawing over it or something. So yeah, just a really quick tip. Also, really quickly, a little tidbit of info that might be helpful to you guys out there. If you are using the polygon lasso tool and you want to switch to the regular lasso tool, if you you click it and you hold down Alt, you will be able to swap between the polygon and regular lasso tool. It was one of the most helpful things I learned at my first job at Microsoft, and I still use it to this day, and it is the absolute best. I'm not sure if I actually demonstrate it in here anywhere, or that you would be able to pick out, but please try it. It is so helpful, especially for coloring stuff. If you're going around like a very weird edge or something, it helps so much because you still get like the clean selection of the polygon lasso, but you don't have to close your selection or do other stuff. So yeah, please give that a shot. Mess around with it. Polygon lasso to regular lasso tool is absolutely essential. And I was wrong earlier. This is the part where I actually clean up the porch a little bit. Not a lot going on here either. Just trying to make sure that the things are spaced a little awkwardly. Maybe some of them are a little closer together, some of them are a little farther apart. I think it's a really good exercise just to draw some relatively parallel lines next to each other in like your sketchbook or something, and then make some do that exact exercise. Make some closer, make some farther away, and see how interesting you can make something so simple. You'll notice it in a lot of animation, now that everything does kind of have like that weird, design to it, to where nothing's actually, close together or nothing is actually perfect. There has to be some imperfection in there. So yeah, give it a shot. I don't know. I think it's helped me out a little bit, get some more interesting stuff into my designs. Same thing here, where I will make an airtight thing. I will invert my selection, and I think I'll like decrease the selection by 1 pixel, because if you don't, you'll end up with like some weird colored crud around the edges of your lines, and nobody wants that. So yeah, contract your selection by 1 pixel, and that will give you a much better looking fill. Yeah, I never realized how incredibly boring it is to watch someone just do flat colors on stuff. That is pretty brutal. Yeah, I hope everyone isn't having a heart attack out there. So right here also you can see the mailbox that I did. I don't think it actually ended up in the final design. It was placed so awkwardly, and I couldn't throw it in front of anything else because it just wasn't quite reading the right way. So yeah, unfortunately it did not make it in. But the design of that mailbox was based off of the mailbox in front of my mother's house here in Washington. It had their family last name on the very bottom placard right there. And the whole thing was made of wood. And she sent me a picture of it, and I really wanted to get it in there. And I think it might end up in, something eventually. But yeah, I really love that design. I'm really, sad that it couldn't make it into the final run. Right there you can see me still working on the porch, just squashing and skewing some stuff, trying to make sure this feels like it's moving back in perspective, quote unquote perspective, in the loosest sense of the word, because this is in no way technically accurate. One quick question for you guys out there. So I got some feedback on my last video, and someone said that they would maybe like to hear some music in the background of like the next one. I don't know if that will make it into this, but if you would like something else in the background to hear other than just my stupid voice, please let me know. I know it can be a little annoying just to listen to one person talk the whole time, but that'd be really great for me to know. Yeah, everything here still just completely flat, nothing too crazy. I think my line work for my front steps had gotten a little bit too thick compared to the line work for the rest of my design. So I selected that entire piece of line work. I then contracted the selection by 1 and then filled it. And it wound up probably a little bit too thin, but I think I ended up going over it at some point. But that is one way to where if you don't want to have to redraw your line work, you can kind of get past it a little bit. It's not going to look perfect, but you might be able to cheat it just a bit. Right now I am roughing or tightening in the under parts of the steps. I'd seen this crisscrossed, slatted, thing in a lot of, houses in the stuff I had referenced or in the houses nearby where I live. And I found it pretty interesting. It makes it feel like that old-timey, just like really relatable kind of like, I don't know, house. I don't know what it was, but there was just a very little piece I enjoyed. Right here, it's just me cleaning up more stuff. I duplicated the same thing over 3 times because there was no way I was going to draw that over and over and over again. There, I'm going to lasso stuff out, invert it, delete it. Try to keep everything as clean as I could. I also use the line tool a lot. It's just really clean if you need like a quick line across in some spots, but I don't think I use it too often in here. Yeah, this was driving me a little bit nuts that I had to go through and touch up all this stuff. It seems very frivolous to me to have to go in and make sure that looks okay, and even though it's going to be covered up by the potted plants in front, and I don't even know if I realized that at the time. I really wish I would have, because that was just a complete time sink that I really could have avoided. If there's anything that wasn't clear enough or you'd like more explanation on, please feel free to leave me something in the comments, or feel free to reach out over to me at AaronCanDraw on Instagram. I'd love to help in whatever way I can. Yeah, I think right here I wanted to make sure that I was going to keep the same design from the window that I had drawn up here, which was completely redesigned by the time I ended up finishing this piece. But I just wanted to get that piece in there for consistency across the board so I didn't mess it up when I tried to redraw it or something. Even though I had to squish and squash some stuff a little bit. I don't know if it's just me, but I mean that does happen quite a bit where you think you can just redo something and it's going to turn out great, but I've drawn hands backward the wrong way and stuff, and it just looks stupid and terrible. So yeah, this bush in front of the house was surprisingly more difficult than I thought. I didn't really have a good piece of reference for this kind of weird bush that I wanted to throw in here that was kind of like, I don't know, a little fat and thin and all kinds of stuff. Especially the under part of it, the actual root holding the bush up. That gave me a lot of problems. So don't ever think that you're that people that you look at their art and think that it was so easy for them to make, because this stunk. This took me forever to figure out, and I think I ended up actually cutting out a good chunk of the video of where I was just struggling with this thing for forever. I think I ended up breaking out my Corey Loftis art books and like just trying to see how he kind of groups his shapes in tree branches and stuff, because that guy is amazing. Still wasn't super happy with it, but at some point it just eventually has to be done. That's one good piece of advice that I would give, is that you have to set your definition of done. Like, what does done mean to you? I mean, done for me on this could have been that I was going to render the entire thing, that I was going to, put all the beautiful specular little highlights on this and that. I was going to render out each leaf, but it wouldn't have gotten what I wanted to out of this. My goal with this was to just focus on the design, focus on nothing else, just try to design something as flat and as best as I can. So I knew that once I had done this, maybe threw in some flat, shading or something to kind of indicate where the forms overlapped, that would have been enough for me. And that's all I really needed to satisfy my definition of done on this. I hope you guys are able to take that away and maybe apply it into your own stuff as well. Just cleaning up some of the shingle stuff, making sure everything goes to the edges of the plane there. Let's see. Yeah, I think I tried to get this going and it just never ended up working. So yeah, that's unfortunate. I think right here I was probably doing some layer management, maybe collapsing some stuff to try to make it a little easier for me to go through and fix things. Right here I wanted to throw in a ground plane to kind of make it feel like it's an actual thing that lives in space. It ends up changing quite a bit toward the end, and I actually did not capture that, unfortunately. But yeah, it just it helps you a little bit, kind of feel like you're not just designing something that's like loose in space. So finally right here we get to me defining some forms with the lasso tool, of course, because that is my favorite. I think I might have gone a little bit overboard with making sure that there was definition underneath each shingle. I think that's a little neurotic on my part. I tried finding a quicker way to shade all of the scallop shingles up there, and I just ended up not finding a cheap way to do it, so I ended up actually having to do something, God forbid. Just making sure from like a pretty loose standpoint of there being a diffuse light overhead, like on top of this building. I mean, it's not hitting it directionally, there's not some super harsh shadow, but it's relatively believable that this could just be kind of ambiently lit on a dark day or something, like a rainy day. One good piece of information I got from my mentor, Ty Carter, was that if you're going to do a call out like this, you really don't want to have some elaborate lighting scheme. If you do, you're going to just kind of look like you're trying to show off as opposed to actually doing something usable and relevant for the modeler. And I think that is a really good piece of feedback. I mean, as artists, we can always try to, flex our muscles and do all the cool things that we can, but maybe it's not exactly what's needed for the task at hand. I would have loved to have done some crazy lighting thing on this and like, whoa, look how cool this looks. But if that wasn't the point of what I was doing, then it shouldn't have made it in, and it didn't. Yeah, so just kind of still going to town on my diffuse lighting scenario. Really trying to get some loose indication of what things overlap with what is in front of and behind of each other. Yeah, so also the color grouping that I used for the house, I constantly checked, which it doesn't look like it here in the capture, but I would make sure that my values are enough, distance away from each other to where they're going to read. Has like a nice stark white trim, has the kind of, ochre looking shingles, and then a darker roof. I think the main read of, all right, well, you're going to have, 70% of the ochre coming through in the house design, and then you're going to have the dark roof, which we're going to remember, and then we're going to have the light accent of all of the trim to kind of break up things a little bit. I think I did an okay job of picking some things that kind of satisfied that. I know that this process video might not necessarily have, the same sage advice as the last one in terms of design and stuff, but it does have a little more technical actually doing things. Still going through, defining some more forms and the shingled roof. Man, you cannot underestimate how long it takes just to do something that looks so simple. It's incredibly overwhelming. I think that was actually the end of my process. It happened a little abruptly. I did not record myself doing the shingles on there. It's all the same stuff I had done before. I drew one pattern of shingled stuff, and then I kind of moved it around and placed things, here and there. Unfortunately, did not record me painting the callouts of the side window over here, which you can see, as well as the painted callout for the chimney. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I can tell you exactly how I did it. I can walk you through it. It was not hard. Yeah, so like I said, thank you so much for coming by. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see, anything else you'd like to know, or any way I can help. Thanks again. See ya.